Star Wars only, I don't know what the fuck your problem is.
Well, we're in the month of December, and that means a few things. The decade of the 2010s, I guess you could call it, is coming to an end, which is depressing as fuck because, my god, that went by really fast. But we're also at the end of 2019. We're at the end of an era of Star Wars, the Disney era, if you will, the beginning of the Disney era. It's not like it's going to go anywhere anytime soon, but also the sequel trilogy era. This has kind of been the era of the sequels. Starting in 2012, when Disney bought Star Wars, it was instantly announced that, hey, we're getting 3 more Star Wars films in this decade. And now that we're in 2019, the decade's coming to an end, the Skywalker saga is coming to an end, and we'll also be finishing up our first season of the live-action show, The Mandalorian, the first live-action show that we've had for the Star Wars universe. Jedi Fallen Order's also already come out in November. We're closing the chapter of this decade and on the Star Wars story, and I guess the big question for the video is going to be, what's next? What's after this? In the terms of Star Wars, what happens after 2019? The next decade is going to be the 2020s, the year 2020 to 2030. And if you recall, we were supposed to get like 6 movies. There was supposed to be a David Benioff and D.B. Weiss trilogy, the guys who wrote the Game of Thrones show, and there was also supposed to be a Rian Johnson trilogy. Now, one of those is 110% canceled at the moment, and the other one, Rian Johnson's, is still kind of up in the air. You got people who are saying, oh, it's not going to happen because I don't like Rian Johnson. But then you got people at Lucasfilm who are still saying, no, it's happening, we just don't know when. And there's also reports that we're getting a 2022 Star Wars film. That date is still scheduled, but it's not going to be the Rian Johnson trilogy. It's going to be a different director. It's going to be another Star Wars film. Is that a new trilogy, or is it just a standalone film? We have a lot of possibilities with the future of Star Wars. The question is, where do those possibilities lie? Where do they go? Are we having a Knights of the Old Republic trilogy? Are we getting a new trilogy at all? Or is it just going to be the decade of spin-off films and TV shows? I think that wouldn't be a bad outcome. If you recall, after 2005, between 2005 and 2015 for Star Wars, is a very different time. And people always say, oh, Star Wars is dead. You want to go to a dead time in Star Wars? After 2005, things weren't so great. You know, it was kind of a weird time to be a Star Wars fan. A lot of people weren't happy with the outcome of the prequels, and so between 2005 and 2015, you had this weird vibe of there's some Star Wars content coming out, mainly games and shows, but no actual movies. There was a Star Wars The Clone Wars movie, which was fucking awful. I remember seeing that in theaters as a kid and just being like, why did I see this? This was pointless. This should have been a show. And then it became a show. I was like, oh, this is great. I love this. And so you have a weird time frame between 2005 and 2015 of no Star Wars movies, but a lot of Star Wars content in terms of games. The expanded universe was still growing, and you had all the comic books and the show, the Clone Wars show. Back in 2003, you had the Clone Wars micro series. Anyone remember that? I mean, that was a good time too. Point is, we're at a different state in the Star Wars timeline right now. It's been, 42 years since the original has come out, and it's still going pretty strong. I know there's some, divisiveness in the fandom, but that's been a thing since the prequels. It's not anything new that we as a Star Wars community and a fandom haven't survived before. But now, we look to the future of, there's a lot more possibilities, in my eyes, for the Star Wars future. For the Star Wars films, the books, the TV shows, a lot of possibilities. I hope we get another Star Wars animated show. I hope during the decade between 2020 and 2030, we get some closure to the story of Ezra Bridger and Ahsoka Tano and what happened with them and Thrawn, and we explore the Jedi a little bit more, their origins and the Sith Order and everything. There's so many possibilities in terms of storytelling that you can have in the Star Wars universe. And one of the odd blessings of making the expanded universe officially not canon and not following that storyline is that you open up the possibilities to endless stories that you can tell, and that's really good. But if you're not going to tell those stories, it does get kind of old. So now you look at the Star Wars future and you say, alright, we have 10 years. We have a film coming out in 2022. We don't know what's coming out after that. But we have one film. What's that film going to be about? What's that going to set up? Is the future of Star Wars in these next 10 years only going to be the shows? Is it only going to be shows like the Cassian Andor show, the Obi-Wan Kenobi show, the Mandalorian show? If that's the case, fine. I think we all can kind of get on board with that. We all like the Mandalorian so far. I don't see the Obi-Wan show being a disappointment in any way, and I'm pretty confident the Cassian Andor show is going to be a show that we happen to watch. Kind of up in the air about that one. Still, And you even have the potential with the Solo spinoff. With Solo Star Wars story, you had the Darth Maul ending with Kira. There's a lot of possibilities there that we still want to explore. The gang wars and whatnot. There's so many stories in the Star Wars universe. It's kind of refreshing to be done with the Skywalker saga, closing this decade on the chapter of Star Wars that really started everything. And whether it's a disappointment or not is a debate we can have and will have for the next 20, 30 years of our lives. We are still debating the prequels to this day, and it's been damn near 15 years. Oh my fucking god, it's almost been 15 years. Yeah, point being, times are changing, my friends. The Star Wars hype train is still gonna go strong till this next decade, but it may dwindle a little bit if we don't have any Star Wars content. That's one thing that's kind of kept the Star Wars community going over these past 6 years, is that we've had constant content coming out from Star Wars. If that slows down, then the Star Wars community might die down a little bit. Not a bad thing. I don't mind getting the people who are bandwagons out of here, but still, I think it's kind of interesting to look to the future of Star Wars and ask ourselves, what's next? But I'd like to hear your thoughts. What do you think's next for Star Wars in the future? Do you think it's bright? Do you think it's dark? I think it's a little bit of both. I think there's endless possibilities, and you can have so many stories that are being told in the Star Wars universe that haven't been told yet. I'm pretty excited to see what we can do. I hope you guys enjoyed this talk. I hope you guys can give me some good comments and feedback on what you think the future of Star Wars is and should be. And who knows, maybe in 10 years' time it'll be 2029 and we'll be talking about the next decade of Star Wars between the 2030s and the 2040s. Star Wars is here to stay, my friends, and so is Star Wars only. I'll see you guys next time, and may the Force be with you, always.